Hi guys, welcome back to the Unfiltered feed. And today in this video, we are going to talk about the Australian Grand Prix. I'm recording this uh, after just 1 hour after the race ended. And yeah, I wanted to record this right now just to express my fresh thoughts and what I thought about the Grand Prix. Before starting, let's quickly talk about the qualifying. Um, I didn't want to make a separate video for it because uh, it then just becomes too much content. I think the qualifying was a bit underwhelming, to be honest, especially when you look at the onboards for uh, the the long straight between turn 8 and 9, when you see the cars physically slowing down by about 50 kilometers per hour, and I think for Kimi Antonelli and even Russell in their Q3 final laps, which are considered to be the fastest laps throughout the weekend, like that's when the car is at the maximum edge. Even in those laps, Russell was downshifting just before turn 9. And I don't think he had to even brake because the speed was reducing so much that he could just, accelerate into turn 9 and then 10 without having to brake. So that's a bit depressing to watch. I'm not going to lie. I think, you know, in qualifying, at least you want to see the cars being pushed to their limits. You want to see the drivers being pushed to their limits. And that's not exactly what we saw yesterday. But I also think that this is just the start. It's the first race of this regulation cycle. So the teams are obviously going to learn more. They're going to, start coming up with techniques to improve or minimize the super clipping, as it's called. The phenomenon where the speed reduces on straights is called super clipping. Um, so, I mean, the drivers can either just lift off to regenerate the battery, or they keep on the throttle, but the car's speed reduces. And the second part is called super clipping. So I think teams are going to come up with new techniques to maximize the speed while also regenerating the battery, or maybe the FI could do something. But I think that's the only bad part that I saw yesterday. Apart from that, it was okay. And I think it's going to get better. So yeah, a decent start. Not very impressed, but yeah. Uh, but the race was it was quite exciting. I mean, I was expecting it to be a very boring race because George Russell was on pole by, I think, 0.5 seconds. Kimi Antonelli was second. And the gap between Russell and the first non-Mercedes car was about zero point 0.8 seconds, which was really huge. So I was expecting the Mercs to basically just fly off and, yeah, win by like 30, 40 seconds. But that didn't happen. Although they did win by 15 seconds, but it was very close. And I think it could have been much closer if a certain red team had, uh, done better with this strategy. We'll talk about that as well. So let's get into this podcast finally, or this video. Yeah? So the first thing I want to show you guys is the result. Russell obviously won the race with Antonelli in P2, and Leclerc was on the podium. Hamilton was very good today. He finished only zero point 0.6 seconds behind Leclerc, which is superb and it's very good. We'll also talk more about him in this video. And then there was a huge gap to Lando Norris. I think about 35 or 40 seconds. I'm not sure what the the final gap was, but towards the end, I think Norris was way behind Hamilton. Verstappen was close behind Norris, and then again there was a pretty big gap to Ollie Behrman, Arvid Lindblad, Bortoletto, and Gasly. So yeah, I think the first thing you can see in this is you've got a lot of teams scoring points. You've got Alpine, Audi, Racing Bulls, and Haas. These were the four teams that I predicted in the midfield. Not really Audi. They have impressed me quite a lot. But I knew that it was going to be close between Haas, Alpine, and Racing Bulls. So all of them have opened their accounts, and obviously the top four teams have done it. Mercedes and Ferrari have scored with both the cars, but McLaren and Red Bull had won DNF and DNS respectively. So with that, let's talk about the first major incident of today, which was the Oscar Piastri DNS. DNS means that he did not even start the race, and it's absolutely heart gutting and heart wrenching for myself as a. I mean, I'm not a Piastri fan, but I do like the way he drives, and especially this being his home race and knowing how it went last year. I think last year he was fighting for a win or a P2 at best, at worst, sorry. But he went off because of the slippery conditions and he ended up, I think, P10 or P9. So knowing what had happened last year, this year, I really hoped that he could score some good points, maybe fight for a podium, but he didn't even have the chance to do that because, from what I know, he I think he moved up a gear too early, and that caused some wheel spin. He basically got a lot more electrical power, which caused wheel spin, and then he basically lost control and crashed on uh, the barrier, and then it was basically over for him. Very, very unlucky. I just hope that he this is not a major confidence blow because um, I think being out in front of your home crowd, I think it's going to take some time for him to really soak up the disappointment, and I really hope that he can come back stronger in China, which is only 7 days in the future. So yeah, that's the first bad thing that happened this weekend. But yeah, I hope he can do well for the next few races this season, and then hopefully next year he can get his podium or win. The next interesting thing, which was kind of expected, was the Ferrari start. Leclerc was starting from P4 and Hamilton was starting from P7. And right off the start, Leclerc managed to take the lead into turn one, which was very impressive. Because when I saw the replays, it didn't really look like he had a very good start. He had a lot of wheel spin, but then in the second phase of the start, he really found a lot of power and basically cruised through Antonelli. Antonelli had a very poor start, but then even Hajar, he found a gap and then he basically dodged Hajar and then went for a late braking move to get the lead from Russell. And Hamilton as well. He got a very good start. He should have been in P4, but he dropped back to P5 behind Lindblad, I think, who also got a great start. But Hamilton was then able to take the lead from Lindblad. I mean, overtake Lindblad, and he basically ended up in P4 and then overtook Hajar as well and ended up in P3. I think this is what happened. But basically, Hamilton and Leclerc were in P3 and P1 for the first few laps, and Russell was in between. So yeah, very good. This was kind of expected because during the Bahrain preseason tests, we saw that Ferrari had a significant advantage when it came to race starts. And I think if you go back to the replay or the highlights, you saw the five red lights go on, and then they immediately went off, and the race began. So I think the guy who was controlling the sequence, the starting sequence, maybe was a Ferrari fan because he wanted to minimize the time so that Ferrari could make the most of their advantage. So yeah, I'm really glad it worked out because I think what I was expecting was Leclerc might recover maybe up to P3 or P2, but I was expecting Russell to still keep the lead and then just disappear off into the distance. But that didn't happen. Leclerc managed to take the lead, and then I think that made the race more interesting. Otherwise, it could have been much more dominating from Mercedes. So yeah, very happy. I just hope that they can maintain this advantage for the next few races. And if they're in the lead, I really hope that they can maximize it and maybe win a few races because I'm sure other power unit manufacturers like Mercedes, Red Bull, Audi, etc. I think they're going to do something about this. I don't think this advantage is going to last for a long time. They'll always have a bit of advantage, but it won't be as large as it was today. So I think they should capitalize on this. And if they're leading after the first turn, they should probably be a bit more smarter with the strategy and try and win the race. Which brings me to the to the next important part as a Ferrari fan. It's the potential strategic blunder from Ferrari. So let me explain what the situation was. Leclerc was P1, Russell was P2, Hamilton was P3, and Antonelli was P4. and I think this was the scenario maybe after the first 5 or 6 laps, and they were basically very close to each other for the next few laps. And then there was VSC because Isak Hajar, his engine blew and he had to stop on the side, and the FIA decided um, to introduce a VSC, and with that, I was expecting at least one Ferrari to box, um, because under a VSC you get a cheaper pit stop. I think you save about 10 seconds of time. And both Mercedes pit under the VSC, and Ferrari didn't. On the first opportunity that they had, they did not pit. But then they had one more chance because the VSC was out for I think 3 or 4 laps. So Ferrari had I think they had two chances to basically pit both Leclerc and Hamilton, and they both stayed out, which I think was the wrong call. I think with Leclerc being the race leader, I'm not sure if Leclerc had pitted. I don't think Mercedes would have pitted George. They would have pitted Antonelli, because I think they would have preferred to have the track position. But I think Ferrari should have also split their strategies. They could have easily pitted Hamilton because he was always behind Russell. So he should have just copied whatever Russell did so that he could at least cover Antonelli, and he could stay closer to George. But what Ferrari did was they left both Leclerc and Hamilton out. Both Russell and Antonelli pitted, and after the VSC, both Russell and Antonelli had free air, so they could basically use their pace advantage, catch up to the Ferraris. And then once the Ferraris pitted, they were basically 15 seconds behind the Mercedes, and the Mercs went till the end of the race on the same set of tires, so they didn't stop again. And the gap was basically 15 seconds for the entire remaining part of the race. The only positive that I see in this case is Ferrari didn't lose more pace to Mercedes. So I think right after Leclerc came out of from his pit stop, he was about 15, 16 seconds behind, and then he finished maybe about 14 seconds behind Russell. So I'm happy that the gap didn't increase, but I'm also not really pleased that the gap didn't decrease, considering that Leclerc had 13 seconds, 13 laps fresher tires when he pitted. So that kind of shows that Mercedes still had the pace. They had a lot of pace in their pockets, but it does show that if Ferrari had split their cars, maybe a Hamilton P3 was possible. Maybe you could have had both the Ferraris on the podium. I don't think the victory was possible because Russell was just too quick. But I think they could have maybe planned a bit better. They could have held Antonelli behind Hamilton, allowed Leclerc to kind of slot in between. But yeah, they basically committed with the same strategy for both the drivers. I think they could have split. I think a lot of viewers on social media are being extremely, let's say, disrespectful to Ferrari. They are basically saying that this was a stupid strategy, blunder. Ferrari basically didn't. They basically just did a clown job today again. I don't really agree with that because the VSC came out on lap 14 or 15, if I'm not wrong, and the race was about 58 laps or 56, something like that. So they basically needed to go about 44 laps on the hard tires if they wanted to one stop. And I don't really think Ferrari could have done that. I don't think that they anticipated that the Mercedes would also do it because 44 laps on hard tires is quite a lot. And with the kind of limited running that they've had, I don't really think they would have expected anyone to do that. So what I think Ferrari thought was they wanted to stay out, hope that Mercedes would box for the second time. It would mean that Mercedes would have had fresher tires, maybe a softer compound. But having seen that Leclerc was able to hold Russell in the first few laps, I think they basically backed themselves to keep the Mercedes behind them after Mercedes' second stop. But unfortunately, Mercedes just went to the end with a one stop, which is why I think Ferrari kind of their strategy messed up. But I think they should have split it with one driver. So you're basically covering for both scenarios. If Leclerc, if the Mercedes are one stopping, then you have a Hamilton with them, to fight to hold them back. And if they are too stopping, then you have a Leclerc who's ready to pounce and take advantage. So I think they messed that up. Lewis Hamilton also on the radio did say that one of them should have come in with the Mercedes. But yeah, I think it's the first race. The engineers I'm sure are also learning more about these cars. I think they kind of underestimated their own pace. Ferrari were much quicker than what we all expected, and I think they were quicker than what they expected. So I hope for China they learn, and yeah, they're more competitive. But yeah, uh, I think that's a lot about Ferrari. Let's now talk about George Russell and Mercedes. I think it was a great race from Russell. More than that, it was a solid weekend from him. Absolutely no mistakes. There wasn't even one moment where it looked like he was under pressure. He always had it under control, so that's amazing from him. I think in the start there was some very highly aggressive racing between Russell and Leclerc, which was really entertaining to watch. It was kind of respectful for most times. There was one moment where Leclerc kind of defended the position a bit too aggressively, but other than that, the racing was great. But once Russell was in the lead, he looked basically under no pressure. He was very calm, very consistent, and he won the race pretty comfortably in the end. But I think Kimi Antonelli has done a great job. Yes, he did have a crash in FP3, which compromised his qualifying setup, and there was a lot of pressure. If that there was a serious chance that he wouldn't even get out in Q1, which would mean that he was knocked out. But the Verstappen DNF basically, so the Verstappen crash in Q1 and the red flag because of it allowed Antonelli to come out and set that one lap in which he went P6, I think, and then he progressed through the qualifying, ending up in P2 on the grid. And then today, the start wasn't as good. He actually dropped all the way back to P7 after the first lap. But then, the Mercedes was very good. And Antonelli as well. He managed to overtake, um, I think it was Hajar, Lindblad, Norris. He overtook them very easily, and then he was right behind Lewis Hamilton. And then after the pit stops, Antonelli also gained, and he was basically P2, fair way behind Russell, but he still kept closing. In the end, finishing maybe about 4.5 seconds behind Russell, which was very good, considering that he was in P7 after lap one. So I think what helped him was that Russell and Leclerc were fighting, so he was able to catch back up. But then he stayed there. It wasn't like Russell was building a larger gap. The gap was kind of constant, and in fact, Antonelli was starting to close the gap towards the end, which are very positive signs. Because if Mercedes is the class of the field, and if they are going to be more dominant in the future, it's very important for us, for the fans, that it's at least a two-way fight. Maybe not for the title, but for a few wins here and there. I do think Russell, with the experience that he has, he will make far less mistakes than Antonelli, and Antonelli is only going to learn with the more mistakes he makes. But I think if he can push George in a few races, it's going to be quite entertaining for us. So I think this is a good sign from Antonelli, and I really hope he can build from it. And I hope we see the both of them fighting for more wins. And yeah, if they tangle, I hope a Ferrari is always in position to kind of take advantage and go for the win. So yeah, impressed with Antonelli, and you have to keep an eye on him and don't really rule him out. He could even maybe fight for the title, but that's I think a bit too much to ask from him. But I think he's going to win a few races this year for sure. The next point is about Lewis Hamilton, and this was something that I really hoped and prayed that would happen. Although I am a Charles Leclerc fan, I really felt really bad and really sad to see Lewis Hamilton the way he was last year. He looked completely dejected. At one point, he literally said that Ferrari should put in a different driver, and that he just isn't good enough anymore, which was really horrible to hear because Hamilton being a seven-time world champion, you don't want to see him down like that. You always want to see him fighting and always, you know, with that self-belief. And luckily, this year in the pre-season testing and even in the press conference in Australia, he kind of reiterated that he has worked on his mental side a bit, um, and that he's going to be a bit more positive, and you know he's going to not bring the older version of him again. And it kind of seems that he's finding these cars a lot more comfortable to drive, because today you could clearly see that Hamilton, I think, was in the second half of the race, he was the faster Ferrari, because when he came out of the pits after his stop, he was about 7 seconds behind Leclerc, and he had only 3 laps fresher hard tires. So it's not like he was on a 10 lap fresher tire, but he reduced that deficit to just zero point 0.6 seconds. And I think if he had 1 or 2 more laps, he would have easily overtaken Leclerc and then finished on the podium, which would be Hamilton's first ever podium for Ferrari. So it's looking really good for Hamilton. He's kind of found his mojo back, I think. The qualifying wasn't as good, but he was only zero point 0.2 seconds behind Leclerc, which was quite good. Unfortunately, there were 3 other drivers right in that slot, or two, if I'm not wrong, P4 and P7, yeah. But they all were very close. So had Hamilton, had found a tenth, he would have been in P5. So, so yeah, not a lot in there, but today Hamilton really looked good, and I'm really happy that he's liking these cars. And in the post-race interview, he said that he was, really excited for the next race, which is going to be a sprint race, which he won last year. So he's a big fan of the Chinese Grand Prix in the circuit. So I really hope that he can, bring his old self back, and start dominating, maybe win races. So that's really exciting to see. So very happy that Hamilton is finally finding his form, and it's really important because he's at Ferrari, and he is the most successful driver of all time. So he has to win with Ferrari, and maybe even fight for multiple wins, maybe a title. You never know. Right now, it's too early to predict for maybe a title, but I really hope that he can fight for wins and take the fight to Leclerc, because two drivers fighting and pushing Ferrari forward is going to be really ideal in the constructors championship, but also in terms of the overall team morale, because when you see two drivers who are at the top of their game trying to push the team, I think it just boosts everybody's confidence and the enthusiasm. So yeah, very happy for Lewis. The next point again is about Ferrari. I'm sorry, there's a lot of Ferrari in this, but I think Ferrari was a very interesting team in this race. I think I will also talk about McLaren and Red Bull towards the end of the video. But yeah, let's quickly talk about Ferrari, and are they really in this? I think today they didn't have the pace to win the race, but I certainly think they should have finished 2-3 had they split the strategies. Even if they didn't finish 2-3, they would have been a bit more closer to the Mercedes, or at least you could have said that they tried everything. Today, what it felt like, Ferrari went a bit defensive, and they really thought that Mercedes would do a two-stop, and then Ferrari would hope to keep them back. So Ferrari wanted to defend from the Mercs instead of attacking them, which I mean, I'm not really too disappointed with. It's, as I said, it's the start of the season, and it's the start of a new regulation cycle. So I think Ferrari would have learned about their car more, and hopefully they can kind of improve their strategic calls next time. But in terms of pure pace, I think it's a bit closer than what we expected. I still think Mercedes is way clear, but Ferrari is clearly the second best team, and they seem to be the closest to Mercedes. And you never know, through a few upgrades, maybe if the Mercedes compression ratio thing is addressed, and if they lose a bit of performance because of that, you never know. Ferrari, they are close enough. I'm not going to lose hope immediately. I think we'll have to wait for the first 7, 8 races and see what's happening. If they drop off, then it's going to be tough. But they are they are within striking distance. I feel they just need one or two upgrades to go in their way, and then they will be there, I think. Um, so with this, I think we can talk about the pecking order. Um, I think Mercedes are the class of the field right now. Ferrari is second, not very close, but they're kind of there. And then you have McLaren and Red Bull in that pack. I think Red Bull haven't really shown their true pace yet because Verstappen obviously got disqualified, or not disqualified, he got knocked out in Q1 because of his crash, which meant he started in P20 and he finished in P6, which was very impressive. But I mean, because Hajar and Oscar crashed, you basically just had six of the top eight runners left. So Verstappen slotting into the top six was kind of expected. He couldn't pass Lando Norris because of a few energy deployment issues. I think otherwise he could have done that because he was looking like the quicker car. So you really don't know where Red Bull is. They did take P3 yesterday in quali with Hajar, and Verstappen usually is a few tenths clear of the second Red Bull seat. So you would probably expect that he would have been a bit more closer to Kimi. Maybe could have beaten Kimi to P2. You never know. And then if that's the case, and if Verstappen is fighting towards the front, then you can kind of expect him to be really aggressive and very smart with the way he manages the deployment. And with it being kind of difficult to overtake, you never know. Verstappen, if he had started in the top four, he could have been in contention. So I think Mercedes and Ferrari are a bit clear. Red Bull is close third, and then I think McLaren, unfortunately, right now are the fourth fastest car. They haven't really had a lot of consistent running throughout the weekend. Um, Norris had a few issues on the Friday. Even in the quali, I think Oscar and Norris both had a few software issues, which feels quite weird to say, but they did have software issues in a Formula One car. Um, and then today, obviously, Piastri crashed out, so not the ideal weekend. But Norris managing a P5, although he was 35 seconds behind uh, Ferrari, behind Hamilton. Yeah, it's not a great sign, but I think McLaren and Red Bull haven't really shown their true potential. So I think they are a bit closer than what we've seen so far. But I think that's the pecking order for me. And then right behind them, I mean, there's a big gap, but then after that, you have probably the Racing Bulls, Haas, very close. I was kind of wrong. I thought Alpine and Haas would fight for that P5 spot in the constructors, but it looks like it's going to be Racing Bulls and Haas, which is very good. Impressive from Racing Bulls. And credit to Red Bull powertrains, because for the first time they're developing their own power unit. And so far they've done a good job with Red Bull and RB. Obviously, Hajar had a power unit failure, and that's what I said during my predictions. I'm expecting Verstappen to also have a few power-related failures. Um, so I think it's a part and parcel of the game. But in terms of performance, they've done well. Audi looks like the next best team, I think, and Alpine and Audi look pretty close. I think Alpine also haven't maximized the potential. There were a few issues that Gasly spoke about yesterday after qualifying. So I think they can really improve a lot. Audi have done a great job. They've looked quick right from Friday. They've always been in the top 10 and even in the race today, scoring points on Audi debut. I know they have just taken over Sauber, but as Audi, this was their first race and scoring points with the new power unit again is fantastic for them. And then behind these guys you have Aston Martin and Cadillac. Aston Martin, yeah, they are very uh, it's very poor. They can't even make the full race distance yet. Today they kind of treated it as a testing session and kept trying new parts. They kept boxing Alonso, fitting a new part and putting him out again, and then again running a few laps. So it was more of a test session for them. But yeah, that's the best they can do. And with Cadillac, I think they just don't have any pace. They have the reliability, but zero pace. Unfortunately, Bottas had a power unit, or that's what they're saying. It's a failure, engine failure maybe. So not the best start for him, but Perez did finish the race. So yeah, although he was last, but he did finish. So something positive for them. So yeah, it's like I predicted. It's quite close to what I said, which I'm happy about. But obviously, this year you're going to see massive developments coming to the cars. Next week is China, so I don't really think there'll be a lot of upgrades for next week. But after that, there's a 2 week gap between China and Japan, where you can see a lot of upgrades coming. So I think the development race is going to really affect the pecking order. And I think for the first 5 to 6 races, or maybe even more than that, whatever you see, you should probably take it with a pinch of salt because there's no guarantee that it's going to stay that way. You never know. McLaren could bring a huge upgrade and just leapfrog everybody and go to the top. Or Mercedes could bring more power and extend their gap to Ferrari. Or Ferrari could bring the rolling Macarena wing and just take off and leapfrog Mercedes. You never know. Anything can happen. So yeah, I'm kind of not thinking that this is the final pecking order. This is just the start. So yeah, I think with that, I've covered most of the Australian Grand Prix. Obviously, I just saw it a couple of hours back, so these are my fresh thoughts. I think it's mostly going to stay like this for throughout the season because I think it's just more fun that way. It's going to be a bit more Ferrari biased, obviously, because as a fan, I'm more focused on what Ferrari is doing. After that, I'm focused on the top 8 teams, and then if there's a milestone drive from someone from the other teams, I would probably notice that. But yeah, primarily I'm a Ferrari fan, so you should probably expect that. I'm sorry if there's too much Ferrari, but yeah, I can't help it. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Um, I'll be back next week with the Chinese Grand Prix review. And I'm sure between these 2 weekends, me and Ved are going to have a few cricket videos. Today, obviously, is the World Cup final. So, yeah, going to sleep and then wake up to that. So yeah, it's exciting times ahead. Formula One is back, and yeah, it's looking good. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Till then, goodbye.